لله رب العالمين الصلاة والسلام على سيد الأشرف الأنبياء والمرسلين سيدنا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه أجمعين أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Now we are now going to make a start on the next session, which will be until Salatul Maghrib, and thereafterwards after Salatul Maghrib until 7 p.m. Inshallah, we will be looking at the final session. Before Salatul Asr break, we were looking at the topic of fitna. I talked about fitna, why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala decrees fitna, and I mentioned that is something which is a decree and a command of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, that every nation will go through fitna. And then I went on to explain, and I'll kind of recap on that particular paragraph again, the one which you have in front of you on the slide, that what happened in Sayyiduna Uthman radiallahu anhu's time, that why was it that the first 6 years flourishing the Islamic state, hukumat, spreading to various parts of the world, no issues, no problems, all the governors, all the ministers doing their jobs and their responsibilities, why was there the inqilab? Why was there the change? So I mentioned that what happened was that various people were accepting Islam who were ignorant of the teachings of Islam, who had lack of knowledge about Islam. So when they accepted Islam, because they had little knowledge of Islam, what happened was that they started practicing on their customs and their cultural interferences started occurring within Islam. So customary things, cultural things, they thought was part of Islam. Some of the reasons why there was that problem in Uthman al-Anhu's time was that many of these Sahabas had passed away. A third reason, I was mentioning before Salatul Asr, that Umar al-Anhu was a very straightforward and a blunt individual. He was very strict, and I explained this in the afternoon session, that just because you're strict doesn't mean you're a zalim or an oppressor. He was strict in the implementation and in the adherence of the rules and the etiquettes of Islam. So Umar al-Anhu was strict, and then you had, after Umar al-Anhu, someone soft, someone mild, as Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu. So people, you could imagine that during Umar al-Anhu's time, they were always on their toes, because Umar al-Anhu was always keeping an eye on them, and they didn't want to take a telling off or a scolding from Umar al-Anhu. They didn't want to get lashed and whipped by Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu. So when Umar al-Anhu passes away and they got Uthman al-Anhu, naturally, they were, they felt a bit more relaxed. And obviously sometimes when you relax a bit too much, sometimes it comes at the cost of Islamic rules, Islamic etiquette. So that was another issue. Number 4. Another issue was that many of the senior Sahabas had left Medina Munawwara, which they were not allowed to do so during Sayyidina Umar radiallahu anhu's time. Now in our last course I mentioned that when Umar radiallahu anhu was the Khalifa, he made it clear to the senior Sahabas, like your Huzaifa bin Yaman, like your Abdullah bin Umar who was still there, like your Abdullah bin Abbas, the main senior Sahabas, they weren't allowed to leave Medina Munawwara during Umar al-Anhu's time. And the reason, the hikmah behind that, was so that if there were any issues, Umar al-Anhu then will have the companions alongside him, and he could do mashwara with them, he could consult with them, he could take their advice. Because if the main people, the senior Sahabas, if they are not there and you're just by yourself, then sometimes, and it happens in life where you need support, you need someone to kind of help you, you need someone's assistance, you need someone to kind of support you in certain things you want to do. Now, if the senior Sahabas were there, then they would have given you that particular support. But if they are not there, the senior men or the senior people are not there, then you won't really expect that same level of commitment from people who have just recently converted to Islam. And what happened was that during Umar al-Dan's time, he made a rule that no senior Sahabas were allowed to leave Medina Munawwara. During Uthman al-Dan's time, and as I was saying before, brothers and sisters, that Uthman al-Dan was too soft. So some of the senior Sahabas came to Uthman al-Dan and they said, "Oh Uthman, we want to migrate to such a city, we want to migrate to Kufa, we want to go to Basra, we want to go to Makkah, we want to go to Egypt." So Uthman al-Anhu, being soft, naram mizaj, being very soft, he said, "Okay, that's fine, you could leave." And the problem was that many of the top-ranked senior companions were now leaving Medina Munawwara. Don't get me wrong, there was still a lot of Sahaba still in Medina Munawwara, and we look at this from the story, but many of them had gone. So that support Uthman al-Anhu could have had from the top-notch, top-ranked Sahabas, it wasn't there. Because if obviously the top-ranked Sahabas are in Kufa or Basra, which is hundreds of miles away, and they didn't have internet and these kind of things in those days, then it would have been very difficult for Uthman al-Anhu to be in contact with his governors and his ministers who happen to be high-level ranked officials and Sahabas regularly. So because of that reason, that led to many more insurgents, people with weaker Iman entering into Medina Munawwara and then becoming the fabric of the people of Medina Munawwara. Another reason why problems started in Uthman al-Anhu's time, tribalism. As I already referred to before, tribalism, that also started. So people who were converting to Islam, because they had little knowledge of Islam, they started relying on their tribalism feuds and issues. Number 6, mistaken concept of piety. Now what does that mean, brothers and sisters? I think I explained this before as well, that another problem was, and we'll look at this in a few minutes' time, that people were spreading rumors during Uthman al-Anhu's time, in particular the Jewish Munafiq rebel Abdullah bin Sabah. Now he was spreading rumors. But the problem is that if nowadays somebody was to spread rumors outside, we look at him and we see, well, he's not practicing. He doesn't come for salah. He doesn't have any sunnah on him. So whatever he says, we're not going to believe. But the problem during Uthman al-Anhu's time was these so-called people, i.e. munafiqs and hypocrites, they actually seemed practicing. So they had beards. They were wearing the Islamic attire, the cloaks, the jubbas. They were coming for every salah to the masjid. So that made it even more difficult for the layman to kind of ascertain what is hypocrisy, what is true, and what is false. So when Abdullah bin Sabah started making all these rumors up about Uthman al-Anhu, about the Islamic government, about the Islamic State, because there was this mistaken concept of piety, in other words, and even nowadays as well, many people think piety is got to do externally. So in other words, he's got a beard, he's wearing the Islamic clothing, he's wearing a turban, but that means he's pious. As I explained to you, brothers, before, as mentioned the hadith of Sahih Muslim, Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam explained, "At-taqwa hahuna." That taqwa is got to do with the heart. So in other words, piety is not about clothing-wise. Piety has got to do with the heart. Meaning purification of the heart, meaning that your heart is such that you have no lust, no cravings, no desires for evil or for sins. At-taqwa hahuna. So what happened was that these people, so-called munafiqs, hypocrites, they had the clothing, they had the beard, they had the Islamic attire. Everybody thought, subhanAllah, these people are so pious, so whatever they're saying is true. But actually, inside their heart, brothers and sisters, it was full of hypocrisy, it was full of nifaq, it was full of kufr. So that was another problem during Uthman's time. The people were saying a lot of rumors, and people were believing in them. Why? Because they just seemed to be pious. And the seventh point to mention here, the ambitions of the ambitious people. Now, people who have ambitions to reach the top, munafiqs or hypocrites who have ambitions to overthrow the government and become the leaders themselves, they will do whatever is within their ability, within their grasp to do that. So what these people will do is that they will join whichever movement which was causing change. So people who are ambitious, they want to do things in life, they want to make a difference. What they will do is that any kind of political groups, any groups which is different, which is against the norm, they will join them. And we see nowadays as well that all these military coups which are happening in Ukraine and obviously in the Islamic countries of Egypt, Libya, Syria, sometimes what happens is that people, they are ambitious, they want to reach the top. So the way you reach the top nowadays is that you just join a political movement, a anti-government kind of group. You join them, you stir a few things up, you take over, and then you become a minister, you become a leader. And this, unfortunately, those people who have that mentality of power and authority, this will always happen until the end of time. That to cause a stir and fitna, they will join any group which is claiming, which is campaigning, which is championing change and differences. They will join these types of groups. So this was another problem of Uthman's time, that people wanted to fulfill their ambitions by being leaders, ministers. They knew that they can't overthrow Uthman, they can't, say for example, compete with Uthman because Uthman was far more pious than them. So what they then do, brothers and sisters, is that they join groups, political movements, to then basically overthrow the government. So these were the problems, slowly, which started during Sayyidina Uthman's time. Now, before we look at the martyrdom of Uthman, I request, brothers and sisters, if we could move on to page 20 in the course handbook, and we'll just go over the next few pages in the course handbook, not word for word, but just like the main paragraphs. And then you get a more better picture of what happened during Uthman's time and how it exactly started. Now we'll begin with Abdullah bin Sabah. Now first and foremost, let me clarify one thing. And that is that Abdullah bin Sabah, he is not a made-up person. He's not a made-up figure. The reason why, brothers and sisters, is because some Shias and Rawafid have made this claim or assertion that there's no such thing of Abdullah bin Sabah. Because he didn't exist. He didn't exist. Basically, what Shias make it out is that the Muslims, they had enough of Sayyidina Uthman al-Anhu and they overthrew him. They don't talk about this hypocrite, munafiq, Abdullah bin Sabah causing conspiracies. So they say that Abdullah bin Sabah, he did not even exist. It's just a made-up figure. And even some Western historians have kind of said this as well, that Abdullah bin Sabah, he doesn't exist. He's like a made-up fella, a made-up guy, a made-up chap, and the Sunnis have just fabricated that. Now, first and foremost, I said that Abdullah bin Sabah, he did exist. Books of history quite clearly explain about his existence, about his group, the Khawarij, the rebels. There's a very famous incident during Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu's time, which we'll inshallah look at in the next course, where Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu annihilated 40,000 of Abdullah bin Sabah's men in the Battle of Nahrawan, happening 40 Hijri. 40,000 rebels and Khawarij were totally wiped away during the Battle of Nahrawan, which was between Ali radiallahu anhu and the rebels. So those people who say that, oh, this Abdullah bin Sabah guy and his followers did not exist, it's a Sunni made-up thing, then they're totally wrong, because books of history quite clearly say that there were rebels, there were these Khawarij types of people who existed, and their leader was Abdullah bin Sabah. Now basically, he was a munafiq, he was a hypocrite. And no group of people have ever harmed Islam or the Muslims than the munafiqs. Disbelievers, they also harm Muslims as well, but they're not as open. Obviously, they only do it openly. And that's, when you look at it, isn't that much of a danger, because when you know someone's openly going to do it, then you could always counteract and you could defend yourself. The danger is when the munafiq and the hypocrite from within causes the problem. That is so dangerous. And that's why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says that there will be 7 levels of hell. And innal munafiqina fi darkil asfali minan nar. That the hypocrites will be in the lowest level of hell. The hypocrites, they will be in the bottom layer of hell. Why? Because of what they do, what they have done against Islam and against the Muslims. So munafiqs, you can never trust them. Hypocrites, you can't trust them. So Abdullah bin Sabah, he was one of those. And basically, he wanted to cause disharmony and disunity amongst the Muslims. So the way he caused the disharmony, brothers and sisters, is that he invented various different types of beliefs, various different types of aqidas. And this is exactly the same, brothers and sisters, the munafiqs of the 21st century, they would do the same as well. If someone from within wants to stir and wants to cause disunity and disharmony, the way they do it is they will do it very cleverly, in terms of they will still wear the Islamic attire, the dress, the beard, that will all be there. But they will invent new aqidas, new beliefs. And people then start following them, little realizing that this particular belief can be taking somebody out of the fold of Islam. So if we have a look at the second kind of paragraph of page 20, that the main belief invented by Abdullah bin Sabah was that every prophet left a wasi, i.e. an administrator, behind him. That every prophet leaves behind a disciple, a khalifa. So he was using that hadith of Sayyiduna Musa alayhi salam, when Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam said to Ali that you are my deputy, like the way Harun alayhi salatu wasalam was to Musa alayhi salam. So he's using that hadith as evidence that, look, Prophet ﷺ always leaves behind a wasi or a khalifa or a deputy. So the same way Harun alayhi salam was Musa alayhi salam's deputy when Musa alayhi salam went to Mantur to collect the Torah. Similarly, when Rasulullah ﷺ has left this world, his khalifa or his deputy is Sayyiduna Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu. So he kind of invented these types of beliefs. He also went on to explain the fourth paragraph that the Khilafat of Hazrat Abu Bakr, Hazrat Umar and Uthman was unlawful. That the rightful Khalifa should only be Sayyidina Ali radiallahu anhu, and the earlier Khilafat of Abu Bakr, Umar and Uthman, they're all wrong. Now he goes on to explain, if you look at the next paragraph, paragraph number 6, that he preached his false self-coined beliefs secretly and in selected main headquarters of Muslim military power such as Kufa, Basra, Syria and Egypt. So this belief of his, he then like a worm went to various parts of the Muslim or Islamic state, Basra, Kufa, Syria, Egypt, and what did he do, brothers and sisters, was that he then started preaching these new beliefs and these new aqaids and notions. Now this is what I was explaining before. Because you had new converts coming to Islam who didn't have that much ilm and knowledge, and as I was just explaining now, brothers and sisters, about mistaken concept of piety, they saw this man with a beard, Abdullah bin Sabah. He looked religious, he looked the part, he looked like a sheikh, he looked so pious, so knowledgeable. He was spreading these kind of information that, oh, Hazrat Ali radiallahu anhu should be the next Khalifa. He's spreading all these kind of rumors or information. The new Muslims, the new reverts, thinking that, oh, this is the teaching of Islam, then started falling for it. And I'll mention this actually mentioned the hadith of Bukhari, that this is one of the signs of these rebels, that they will dress or they will do their worship and ibadat in such a way that it will make any one of your prayers look insignificant to their prayers. So they will pray with so much khushu', like so calmly and so much concentration in their prayers. They will do their ruku and sajda and qiyam in such an immaculate way that you, when you look at their prayers, you think, you know what, our prayers are nothing compared to this. Our prayers are insignificant compared to this. They will fast in such a way that you think, you know what, my fast is nothing compared to this. Prophet ﷺ gave, this is like a sign of these rebels. So Prophet ﷺ predicted that this is how they will be. That they will look so pious that people will think their ibadat and worship to be insignificant to theirs. The Prophet ﷺ said, however, Iman would kind of flee from their heart at the same speed as an arrow fleeing from a wild animal which is being hunted. So as I was saying that these people, they started converting their new religion, their preachings to the newly converted Muslims, and from there you slowly started getting unrest. Now I'm going to explain that, if you look at the next paragraph, he firstly went to Medina Munawwara. So he goes to explain that Abdullah bin Amir, who was the governor, told Abdullah bin Sabah to leave Medina Munawwara, that we don't want these kind of false beliefs to be spread in Medina Munawwara. Then afterwards he went to Basra. He goes on to explain that, he went to Basra first, not to Medina. He went to Basra, and then Abdullah bin Amir told him to leave. Then afterwards he went to Kufa, and he went to various places, Egypt and so on. He went to Damascus, which was under the governorship of Hazrat Muawiyah radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And he goes on to explain that he was unsuccessful. He couldn't actually spread his mischief as much. But obviously he was there for a while. So he did leave his kind of poison, his poisonous beliefs, his nifaq and his hypocrisy was there. And he then goes on to explain that slowly there was some kind of unrest within the Muslim state. Now, if we now move on to page 22, where fourth paragraph, he goes on to explain that first and foremost, he was spreading rumors about Ali radiallahu anhu should be the first Khalifa. Thereafterwards, a new campaign started where basically he started calling all the governors of Uthman anhu to be religious and that they were committing zulm. So started saying bad things about the governors, that Uthman anhu's ministers or governors, they are bad. And if you look at this particular paragraph, he goes on to explain that they started forging letters which showed that Hazrat Ali, Talha and Zubair had full sympathy for them and their mission, and they disliked the Khalifa Hazrat Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu. So they started making up letters, and remember these three companions were the main companions. They were the ones who, if you remember, still selected Uthman anhu to be the next Khalifa. Hazrat Talha, Hazrat Zubair, Hazrat Ali. Obviously, even though he didn't select, but he was part of the 6 nominated by Umar. So they made letters from them, forged letters that, oh look, even Ali radiallahu anhu, Hazrat Talha, Hazrat Zubair are agreeing with us that these governors are bad, they're committing zulm, they're committing injustices, and that they dislike the Khalifa, they dislike Hazrat Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And he goes on to explain that they spread rumors, if you look at 2-3 paragraphs down, that they spread rumors also against Walid bin Uqba, who was the governor of Kufa, and they wrongly accused him of drinking liquor and provided false witnesses against him, because of which the Khalifa punished him. So in other words, because obviously in an Islamic state you require 2 male witnesses to establish someone drinking alcohol, and if 2 male witnesses can testify, that person will be lashed 80 times. So they got 2 people, false witnesses, to complain that, oh, Walid bin Uqba, he's drinking alcohol. So what happened? The Khalifa, under Uthman anhu's command, then ordered that, okay, Walid bin Uqba should be lashed 80 times. So then they started complaining, oh, look at Hazrat Uthman anhu, he's ordering unjust people, he's ordering innocent people, Walid bin Uqba, to get lashed. So what I'm trying to say is that they were causing fitna this way and that way. So they were saying, making up rumors, oh, Walid bin Uqba is drinking alcohol. So he gets lashed for it, but then they spread rumors from this side, oh, Walid bin Uqba, he's innocent, he didn't drink alcohol, but even then he's still getting lashed. So you could imagine how vicious circle they were in, the Muslims were in, that there were rumors, counter-rumors, accusations, allegations. It was totally getting out of hand. It was totally getting out of hand. You could imagine, like sometimes in an area you live in, community you live in, where there's rumors coming left, right, and center. You don't know what to do. You don't know who to believe. And that was what was happening. That's what Abdullah bin Sabah wanted to create. This kind of insecurity that no one can be believed, no one can be respected. That the Khalifa's bad, the governor's bad, minister's bad, everyone's bad. So when you get that, when it's indirectly being hammered into you, that or the imams are bad, the leaders are bad, then you think, oh, you know what, let's not follow them, let's not respect them, let's do our own movement, let's do our own political thing, and let's overthrow the government. But the reality is that the imams are good, but because of the mischief and mischief making of a few, they give this image that everyone's bad. And this is what Abdullah bin Sabah was doing. Now moving on to the next page, page 24. They made some allegations against Hazrat Uthman radiallahu ta'ala. Many allegations, but there are 3 which is mentioned here. The allegations they made, number 1, that Uthman radiallahu anhu belonged to the Banu Umayyah, And one of the allegations which was made that, oh, Uthman anhu is removing people from the Banu Hashim, from the big ministerial offices and responsibilities, and is giving it to people from his own clan. So that was the first accusation they made. In other words, accusation of favoritism. That the big responsibilities, the big duties, the big zimmedaris were being given to the Banu Umayyah, i.e. people from his clan, and not to the Banu Hashim. Again, number two, the second kind of complaint they made, and I touched on this in the earlier lesson, session in the morning, that they allege Hazrat Uthman anhu was extravagant and that he gave away money to his relatives, thus he squandered the money from the Baytul Mal. They said that Uthman anhu is giving all the money away to his family and friends from the Banu Umayyah. And as I explained this point in the morning, brothers and sisters, totally untrue, because Sayyidina Uthman anhu, he was a successful businessman. He had a lot of money. His father, Uthman, when he passed away, left behind a lot of inheritance for his son Uthman. Uthman didn't blow away all that money, but rather used every single penny and dirham and dinar from his father to set up businesses and to trade in Medina Munawwara. And he had a lot of business contacts in Syria, in Sham, in Egypt and other places around the Arabian Peninsula and also in North Africa. So the money which was coming to Uthman anhu and then he was giving to his family, it was not from the Baytul Mal, it was not from the public treasury, brothers and sisters, but rather it was from the actual, his own expenses, his own wealth. And then another allegation they made was that Uthman anhu burned some copies of the Holy Quran. Burnt copies of the Holy Quran. If you were to say to someone, oh, Imam Sahib's burning the Holy Quran, you think, what is he? Is he a Imam? Is he a believer? Is he a munafiq? What is he? Why is he burning the Holy Quran for? So now the reason why Hazrat Uthman anhu burnt the Holy Quran, I should have mentioned this point when we were looking at how Uthman anhu compiled the Holy Quran. So when Uthman anhu, when he compiled the Holy Quran, he didn't want any other scriptures of the Holy Quran other than the one he compiled. And the reason why, brothers and sisters, is that if he allowed other scriptures of the Holy Quran to be there, it would have caused further confusions. People would have said, okay, what is the Quran then? Is it this one here, the one Uthman anhu compiled, or is it the one Abu Bakr anhu compiled earlier? What is the right one? That would have led to even more infights and problems later on. So therefore, Uthman anhu ordered that other scriptures, mushafs, copies of the Quran, other than his, he ordered that it should be burnt. Not because, Nauzubillah, he had hatred for the Quran. No, not because of that. But the reason why he did it was because if he didn't and other copies of the Quran were prevalent, it would have led to confusion as to which one is the actual Quran and which one was compiled by Uthman radiallahu ta'ala. So these were some kind of like complaints made by these, allegations made by these munafiqs of Abdullah bin Sabah and his followers. Now the next paragraph on page 24 goes on to explain the conference of the governors. In other words, Uthman anhu, when he heard these allegations, which were obviously totally untrue, he decided to hold a meeting. He called all the governors and ministers and he told them to basically find out exactly what is happening. Is it true that there is this kind of unrest everywhere around the Islamic government and the Islamic State? Now, if we have a look at the second paragraph, please, on page 24 of the Conference of the Governors. So he explains that all the governors attended the meeting. Hazrat Uthman inquired from them about the growing unrest in the state. They told him that it was due to some mischief mongers who wanted to overthrow the government. Yeah, just some mischief makers wanting to overthrow the government. They're making these kind of rumors and slanders. Now, Hazrat Muawiyah anhu, he goes on to explain that he suggested to Uthman that, oh Uthman, it's not safe for you to remain in Medina. It's not safe for you to remain in Medina Munawwara because the rebels are slowly growing up. And if we stay in Medina Munawwara, because many of the top-ranked Sahabas are not here anymore, these rebels could easily come to Medina and kill you and assassinate you. So subhanAllah, Sayyidina Uthman al-Anhu responded by saying that I don't want to, number one, a Muslim's blood to be shed on my account, and number two, I don't want to leave the blessed city of Medina Munawwara. So he declined the offer. Now what he then did was, and if we have a look at the last couple of lines of page 24, that he sent 4 people to tour the provinces. And the 4 Sahabas who he sent was Muhammad bin Maslama, should be Maslama here, Usama bin Zayd, Ammar bin Yasir, and Abdullah bin Umar. So he sent these 4 companions to go to these provinces and find out the information. Now, the next part on page 26 goes on to explain that the 4 companions who he sent, 3 of them came back and they said that basically there's no problems. Who came back? Usama bin Zayd came back, Abdullah bin Umar came back, and Muhammad bin Maslama, they came back. They said to Uthman, oh, there's no problems. Ammar bin Yasir, by the way, brothers and sisters, there is a report which can be found in Tarikh Tabari. Imam Tabari, a very famous historian, has written a book called Tarikh Tabari. And in this report it's mentioned that Ammar bin Yasir radiallahu ta'ala, everybody knows about his virtues. His mother Sumayyah was the first martyr, female martyr of Islam. So it's mentioned that Ammar bin Yasir, he did not return back to Medina. Uthman radiallahu anhu sent him to Egypt to find out, is there any rumors of strife and difficulty? But it's mentioned in Tarikh al-Tabari that Ammar bin Yasir radiallahu anhu did not return back. Now, this hadith or this text from Tarikh al-Tabari, for your information, brothers, is weak. The narrators are weak and za'if. So that's why we will take it with a pinch of salt, whether that was the case that Ammar bin Yasir anhu, did he return back or not. But I will mention something is that Ammar bin Yasir anhu, did not participate in the assassination of Sayyiduna Uthman radiallahu ta'ala. Again, these are Western historians, Shia, Rawafid kind of sources, which says that Ammar bin Yasir anhu participated in the martyring of Uthman anhu. Totally incorrect, brothers and sisters. It's not true. Such a filthy thing, such a horrendous thing, such a horrible thing of martyring a companion can never be carried out by a Sahabi or by a companion. It was done by munafiqs, it was done by hypocrites, it was done by these Khawarij, rebels, insurgents. They're the ones who martyred Uthman anhu. Not a single Sahabi ever helped or assisted or planned to martyr a Khalifa, and not only a Khalifa, someone who was the son-in-law of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, such a Sahabi, Nauzubillah, would ever think or dream of doing such a thing. So Ammar bin Yasir, he was never part of the assassination. Now moving along to the next part, again, the insurgents, they continued with various accusations about Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu, which then led to a situation which, if we move on to page 30, third paragraph. Now, what happened was that the insurgents, because obviously they wanted to overthrow Sayyidina Uthman anhu, so they came to Ali anhu and they said to Ali anhu that, "Oh Ali, we want you to be the next Khalifa. We're going to overthrow Sayyidina Uthman anhu and we want you to be the next Khalifa." Now, Ali anhu was having none of it. Obviously, he was the second person to pledge allegiance on Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu's hand. So Sayyidina Ali was having none of it. So when these rebels were saying to Ali, "Come on, let's do a coup and you will be our next leader," Ali anhu was having none of it. So Ali anhu said to these insurgents that, "Come on, let's try to resolve this issue. What's your problem? What do you want?" So the insurgents, they made a demand. The demand was that we want Muhammad bin Abi Bakr. We want Muhammad bin Abi Bakr, i.e. Abu Bakr anhu's son, to be the governor of Egypt, where they had their main base. We want Muhammad bin Abi Bakr to be the next governor of Egypt. That was the demand they had. Now Ali anhu, to again appease and to stop the fitnas and the rumors and from the mischief from spreading, promised the rebels that I will make sure, I promise you, that your complaint and your request, we will deal with it. Now when Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu, when he heard of this, he said that by Allah, I will listen to what the rebels want. Whatever they want, I am willing to listen. He was crying, tears were coming out of his eyes. The people around, they were also crying as well. And why was Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu crying? He was crying, brothers and sisters, because he was innocent. He didn't do anything. What was he doing wrong? What did Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu do wrong for the rebels to go against him? Alright, fair enough, if he had done something bad, we could understand. But what did he do wrong? And not only that, he didn't do anything wrong, he was innocent, but even then he was bending his back and he was telling these rebels that you could do whatever, you could make the demands, whatever you want, I am willing to fulfill. I am willing to fulfill it as long as you don't cause any fitna, as long as you don't cause any disunity and disharmony. So Uthman anhu was crying, even the people around were crying. The rebels, they requested Uthman anhu that, "Oh Uthman, we want Muhammad bin Abi Bakr to be the next the governor of Egypt." So Sayyidina Uthman anhu agreed and accepted. Now a few days later, if if we now move on to the next section, the siege of Hazrat Uthman al-Anhu's house. A few days later, a large group of rebels were shouting on the street, "Revenge, revenge." They wanted revenge. Why? Why did they want revenge? They showed the people a letter which was apparently written by Sayyidina Uthman al-Anhu, where it said, "Uqtul Muhammad bin Abi Bakr." Where it said, "Kill Muhammad bin Abi Bakr." Uqtul Muhammad bin Abi Bakr. Now, some people have then interpreted this letter as, Uthman al-Anhu was supposed to write Iqbil Muhammad bin Abi Bakr, like accept Muhammad bin Abi Bakr, something like that, but then the dots were kind of changed. Or other ulamas and scholars say that, you know what, there was nothing changed. These rebels just literally forged a letter, and it's got Uthman al-Anhu's signature, that basically they basically made up Uqtul Muhammad bin Abi Bakr, kill Muhammad bin Abi Bakr. So they got this forged letter, which apparently is saying kill Sayyidina Muhammad bin Abi Bakr, and now they're saying, look at what Uthman al-Anhu is doing. He's saying to us that yes, Muhammad bin Abi Bakr can be the governor of Egypt. Now he allegedly has written a letter where it says that you kill Muhammad bin Abi Bakr. So now the insurgents were having none of it. They said, you, O Uthman, you have to let go of authority. You are not fit to be a Khalifa anymore. If you are telling us, again this is according to them, this is totally untrue, but if you are telling us that to our face that Muhammad bin Abi Bakr can be the Khalifa, and then afterwards you say that let's kill him, you are not fit enough to be regarded as a Khalifa of Islam, Khalifa of Deen. So therefore what happened? They said that we have none of it, we want you to give up hukumat, we want you to give up the Khilafat. So going back to the hadith, brothers and sisters, I mentioned right in the morning, that Prophet ﷺ saying, فَإِنْ أَرَادُوكَ عَلَىٰ خَلْئِهِ فَلَا تَخْلَعْهُ. That if they are the munafiqs or the hypocrites, they intend to remove the qamis, the shirt of khilafat from you, فَلَا تَخْلَعْهُ, do not remove it. So Uthman al-Anhu was adamant that I'm not going to give up the khilafat. So you then have a situation where then the rebels surround Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu's house. Inshallah, we'll continue with the next part and his eventual martyrdom. Inshallah, after Salat al-Maghrib. Allah gives tawfiq, wa ma alayna illa al-bala. Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Alhamdulillah, we looked at what led to the insurgents raising the mischief and the turmoil. And we have also looked at what was the final straw according to them, which led them to surround Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu's house. And as I was explaining before Salat al-Maghrib, that the insurgents, they forged a letter where apparently Uthman radiallahu anhu wrote, kill Muhammad bin Abi Bakr. They were saying to Uthman, you are not fit to be a Khalifa because you're telling us to accept Muhammad bin Abi Bakr as the leader of Egypt, but then you backstab us and you write a letter that killed Muhammad bin Abi Bakr. So they shouted out and they wanted Uthman ibn Anhu to get let go of the Khilafat, upon which Hazrat Uthman ibn Anhu reminded them of the hadith that Rasulullah said that when they, i.e. the munafiqs, want to remove the shirt of Khilafat from you, فَلَا تَخْلَعْهُ, do not remove the shirt of Khilafat for them. Now moving along with the story, what happened was that the insurgents, they surrounded Sayyiduna Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu's house. And initially, the house arrest or the house imprisonment of Uthman radiallahu anhu wasn't that severe in terms of they allowed him to go to the masjid and lead the prayer. But then they realized that whilst Uthman radiallahu anhu would be in the mosque, he was delivering sermons and lectures, and they thought that if we don't put a stop to that, Uthman radiallahu anhu may then change the mind of the people, and the people will then become influential and they may then overtake us. So then they stopped Uthman radiallahu anhu from even going to the mosque. Now during the days he was surrounded, Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu made various pleas with the rebels, reminding them of the favors he had done for them and for the Muslims in general, and that he, i.e. Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu, did not deserve this. He doesn't deserve this. And in particular, I want to refer to the hadith, which can be found in Sunan al-Nasa'i, in Sunan al-Tirmidhi, that the day Uthman radiallahu anhu was surrounded by the rebels, Ashrafa alayhim Uthmanu. Sayyiduna Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he looked towards the rebels and he said, Unshidukumullah wal Islam, that I adjure all of you, Hal ta'lamuna, do you not know that when Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam came to Medina Munawwara, there was no water except the water from the well of Ruma, which I mentioned earlier on regarding Uthman radiallahu anhu's virtues. And then he reminded them that this well of Ruma, which belonged to a Jew, I bought it with my own money and then I gave it as waqf, as public property to the Muslims to drink from. So the rebels replied by saying, yes, we know that you had bought the well of Ruma out of your own money. Then Uthman radiallahu anhu goes on to explain that why is it then that today, i.e. during the days you are surrounding me, تَمْنَعُونَنِي أَنْ أَشْرَبَ مِنْهَا, that you are stopping me from drinking from the well of Ruma. So that was the first plea Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu gave or communicated to the rebels that, come on, at least allow me to drink from the well of Ruma. Even though this well of Ruma I had bought with my own money, allow me to drink from it. But the rebels were having none of it and they weren't even allowing Uthman radiallahu anhu to drink from the well of Ruma, but rather he had to drink from the bitter, sour seawater. Then Uthman radiallahu anhu called out to the rebels again and he said that Anshudukumullah wal Islam, or Unshidukumullah wal Islam, that I adjure you in Allah and in Islam's name, that do you not know that Masjid al-Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam was tight, in other words, there weren't that much space, and Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that who is going to buy this plot of land for me in exchange for a plot of land in the hereafter and in Jannah. And then with my own money, I bought this plot of land. So the rebels all agreed by saying, yes, we know that you bought this plot of land with your own money and you expanded the Masjid al-Nabawi sallallahu alaihi wasallam up to and including this plot of land. So then Uthman radiallahu anhu says to the rebels then, why is it that today you then stop me from going into that masjid which I donated my money, which I gave my money to buy it for the sake of Allah and His Rasul sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Why is it that you then stop me from entering this masjid to pray 2 rakat salah? And he also reminded them that it was he, Sayyidina Uthman anhu, who prepared the Jaysh al-Usra, who prepared the army for the Battle of Tabuk. And he also reminded them of that hadith which I mentioned before, that Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam was once on Mount Thabir along with myself and Abu Bakr and Umar. فَتَحَرَّكَ الْجَبَلُ, and this mountain started shaking. So Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam then tapped his feet on the mountain and he said, Uskun Thabir, that be quiet, O Thabir, because فَإِنَّمَا عَلَيْكَ نَبِيٌّ وَصِدِّيقٌ وَشَهِيدًا, because upon you is a Nabi, upon you is a Siddiq, Abu Bakr as-Siddiq radiallahu ta'ala an, and upon you are 2 martyrs, as Uthman, as Umar anhu, which is guaranteed he was a martyr because he was killed by Abu Lu'lu, the Persian slave, and the other one was me. So when he narrated this hadith to the rebels all agreed and said, Allahumma na'am, yes, we agree that we did hear this hadith from Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then Uthman anhu said, Allahu Akbar, Shaheedun wa Rabbil Kaaba, inni Shaheedun Thalatha. He started, saying Allahu Akbar Takbir, and he started saying, by the Lord of the Kaaba, I am a Shaheed, I am a Shaheed, I am a Shaheed, 3 times to indicate that what they're going to do to me today will be a brutal murder. It will be a murder of someone who is oppressed and mazloom. It will be a murder that I am the Shaheed, I am the victim, and they are on the wrong. So when Sayyidina Uthman who said that to all the rebels, and he made it clearly to them that what you're doing, don't think of it that you're on the right, on the haq. Quite clearly mentioned the hadith that I'm the victim here, I'm the Shaheed here. So that will then mean that you are the zalim, you are the oppressors, quite clearly indicating that Uthman anhu, his death, him being surrounded, is totally unjust, totally unwarranted, because he was an innocent person, he was soft, he was kind-hearted, he did everything. Even the rebels, when they were making issues and so on, he didn't raise an eyelid at them, but rather he kind of wanted to help them. Whatever demands they made to Uthman anhu tried to help them, but obviously they were having none of it, and then they surrounded Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu's house. Now moving on to the slide which is in front of us, it's mentioned that the day when Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu was martyred, it's mentioned that Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu, he saw a dream. And in his dream, he saw Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam, Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala an, and Sayyidina Umar radiallahu ta'ala an. He saw them 3 in the dream. And Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to Uthman in the dream that, O Uthman, break your fast with us. Break your roza and your fast with us. And it's mentioned, brothers and sisters, that the day Uthman anhu was martyred, he was fasting. And by night, he had been martyred, and he had now become a guest in Jannah, a guest of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in paradise. Now it's mentioned that, obviously I mentioned this in the course book as well, there are many Sahabas like Hazrat Hassan, Hussein anhuma, they were guarding Hazrat Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu's house. And Hazrat Uthman anhu made it clear to them that, look, I don't want any one of you to attack these insurgents or rebels. If they want to break into my house and martyr me and kill me, then allow them to do so. because I don't want basically a Muslim's blood to be shed on my account. That's how soft and gentle Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu was. Even though he had totally permissible for him within his own right out of self-defense to kill these rebels, Uthman radiallahu anhu did not choose to take the option, but rather he said that they could do whatever they want. I'm a shaheed, I'm a martyr. And it's mentioned that he told everyone who was basically protecting him to leave the house and let the insurgents come. So it's mentioned that when the rebels broke into his house, he was reciting Surah Taha. Surah Taha, brothers and sisters, it's in the 16th chapter of the Holy Quran, 16th juz, and it's around half a juz long. So they were breaking into his house. Sayyidina Uthman ibn Anhu was not disturbed, he just carried on reading Surah Taha. And it's mentioned that he carried on reading as normal without any mistakes all the way until the end of the surah. If it was any one of us, somebody's breaking into our house, or even though we try to read, we would not be able to read properly because we're thinking, oh, these guys are breaking in, they're going to kill me. You naturally will probably read it, but read it quickly, or even if you are reading it, you'll be making mistakes because your mind is somewhere else. No, Hazrat Uthman ibn Anhu was calm. He kept on reading Surah Taha all the way until he finished. And after he finished Surah Taha, he then made dua, and he then kept on reciting the following verse, which is verse 137 of Surah Al Imran, and it begins with قَدْ خَلَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ سُنَنْ فَسِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ فَانْظُرُوا كَيْفَ كَانَ عَاقِبَةُ الْمُكَذِّبِينَ. And in a nutshell, what this ayat is telling us, قَدْ خَلَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ سُنَنْ, which means that the ways before you has indeed come to you. Sunan means the ways, the tariqah, the practices of before has indeed come to you. فَسِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ, which means continue with your journey. فَانْظُرُوا, and watch and see كَيْفَ كَانَ عَاقِبَةُ الْمُكَذِّبِينَ, that those who are the deniers and rejectors, what punishment they're going to have. Subhanallah, this ayat has got nothing to do with Uthman ibn Anhu's martyrdom. But this ayat paints a picture of Hazrat Uthman ibn Anhu's martyrdom. And there's so many verses actually in the Holy Quran where I'm sure if we read it or study it, we could think, you know what, this actually relates to my life, or this relates to my situation, or this relates to the situation which is happening around in the world. So exactly here, قَدْ خَلَتْ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ سُنَنْ, which means the ways before you has indeed come to you. What does that mean? It means that this is what happened to the previous nations, to the prophets in particular, that their people went against the prophets. So, فَسِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ, which means that continue with your journey, that continue doing your da'wah, and just wait for what will happen to those who rejected and those who denied. And as I said, brothers, that this ayat can never do with Hazrat Uthman's martyrdom, but Uthman ibn Anhu recited it because he painted a picture of his life. In what way? In the way that the same way the people in the past went against their prophet, similarly, Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu's people are going against Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu. So Allah says, فَسِيرُوا فِي الْأَرْضِ, continue with your journey. And the journey here means obviously leave this world and continue with the journey to the hereafter, the journey to Akhirah, the journey to Jannah and Paradise. And فَانْظُرُوا كَيْفَ كَانَ عَاقِبَةُ الْمُكَذِّبِينَ, those who rejected you, those who killed you, those insurgents who rebelled and went against you, see what happens to them. And what happened to them, obviously during Sayyidina Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu's life, all the rebels were annihilated during the Battle of Naharawan, and even those who did survive, then obviously in the hereafter Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala will punish them severely and will humiliate them in the hereafter. So Sayyidina Uthman ibn Anhu, brothers and sisters, was reading this particular dua, this ayat, when the rebels broke in. Now it's mentioned in the course handbook that exactly what happened, that if we move on to page 34, he explains that initially, or firstly, Muhammad bin Abi Bakr. Now let me explain to you about Muhammad bin Abi Bakr, because again, you have some traditions, mainly from Shia sources, Rawafid sources, that Muhammad bin Abi Bakr was part of the murder and the killing of Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Now it's mentioned in a narration that Muhammad bin Abi Bakr broke into Uthman radiallahu anhu's house to attack him, and Uthman radiallahu anhu said to Muhammad bin Abi Bakr that if your father, i.e. Abu Bakr, was alive, he wouldn't have been pleased with what you're doing. He wouldn't have been happy with what you're doing. So as soon as Muhammad bin Abi Bakr heard these words, that if my father Abu Bakr was alive, definitely he won't be happy of what I'm doing, he then kind of refrained from attacking Uthman ibn Anhu, and then he went away. So yes, he was part of the insurgents or rebels to break into the house, but he wasn't the one who killed Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu. As I mentioned, the actual killing itself was done by these hypocrites, munafiqs of Abdullah bin Sabah and his followers. Now, what exactly happened was that his wife, Naila, tried to defend Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu, but in the melee which followed, she got her fingers cut. And it goes on to explain that one of the insurgents hit Sayyidina Uthman ibn Anhu's head, on the second paragraph, page 34, with the axe, whilst the next person struck him with a sword. And it's mentioned 2 paragraphs down that Amr bin Hamd, who was an Egyptian who was part of the insurgents, he was the one who beheaded Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu. So as you can see, brothers and sisters, that this murder of Uthman ibn Anhu is not what we call like a hit and run accident, or kind of like a sniper's bullet and then they ran away. This is what we call brutal murder. It was like they were attacking Uthman ibn Anhu. They were striking him on his head, on his body, and then the worst and the wretched of them, Amr bin Hamd, he actually beheaded, so literally took off the head of Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu. This unfortunately was the way they treated the Khalifa and the son-in-law of Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam. And those who obviously do these kind of things to the pious people of Allah, the Khalifas of Allah, the servants of Allah, then there's only one punishment waiting for them, and that is in the hereafter. They will be humiliated, and they will be doomed, and they will be in Jahannam forever and ever. So this is how they wiped away Sayyidina Uthman ibn Anhu from this world. Now he goes on to explain that the last part of page 34, the news of his martyrdom. So he goes on to explain that Hazrat Ali ibn Anhu, what was his reaction to the death? So he's mentioned that when Hazrat Ali ibn Anhu heard, he was stunned on hearing about the assassination of Hazrat Uthman ibn Anhu. Everyone was shocked. Obviously, they knew about the insurgents, but they never thought that they would go one step far and kill Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu. So it's mentioned that he actually rebuked, if you go on to page 36, his sons, Hazrat Hassan and Hussein, for not doing enough to stop the Khalifa, or to stop Hazrat Uthman ibn Anhu from being martyred. And it's also mentioned that other Sahabas, Sahabiyas, if we go on to page 38, Goes on to explain about Thamama bin Adi, Hazrat Aisha radiallahu anha. They were all kind of sad at the death of Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu ta'ala an. On page 38, the third paragraph, he goes on to explain that Abdullah bin Abbas anhu, who is known as Mufassir al-Quran, that's his title, the one who has commentated on the Holy Quran. So Ibn Abbas anhu would say that if any of the Muslims, or if the majority of the Muslims were involved or had supported in the assassination of Sayyidina Uthman anhu, then they would have been stoned like the way the people of Lut alayhi salatu wassalam were stoned. But because they weren't stoned, so that in itself gives the answer that for the martyrdom of Uthman anhu, the Muslims weren't involved in that. But actually it was the munafiqs, the rebels, the insurgents, who claim to be Muslims, who act like Muslims, who have the beard, who have the dress, who have the qamis, but they are not true Muslims. They're the ones who had assassinated and killed Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Now regarding his burial, he goes on to explain that he was given a ghusl and janazah was prayed by Hazrat Zubair bin Awwam radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And it's mentioned that he was buried in Jannatul Baqi. If we go on to page 36, he explains that he was buried in Jannatul Baqi. For a few days they couldn't bury him, but he was buried in Jannatul Baqi. Some scholars, some narrations say that he couldn't even be buried in Jannatul Baqi first, because the rebels took over Medina. They were looting the Baytul Mal. You can imagine it was all total chaos and carnage over there. So some narrations, brothers and sisters, say that he was actually buried in a Jewish cemetery of Medina. He was buried there. But later on, during Hazrat Muawiyah radiallahu anhu's khilafat and time, the body was taken out and he was then buried in Jannatul Baqi. But fil hal, at this moment in time, yes, his body is in Jannatul Baqi. It's in Medina Munawwara. Now, as I was saying, and obviously we'll touch on this a bit more when we look at Sayyidina Ali anhu's course, the consequences of Sayyidina Uthman anhu's assassination has been catastrophic for the Muslims. Catastrophic in terms of it kind of, how should I say, put paid to any possibility of there being total ittihad and complete unity amongst the Muslims. Because when you look at it, Sunnis and Shias are never going to unite. And that is engraved, that in any issues, especially issues about Uthman radiallahu anhu, Hazrat Ali anhu, they're not going to unite on that. So the first consequences of this is that it paid or it kind of like led to there being no ever, or it led to, I should say, it led to a situation that there would never be the possibility of Sunnis and Shias being together or being united, because then the firqa, a new sect formed, and that was the sect of Shias. They formed from this martyrdom of Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Because initially there weren't any sects in Islam. It was all under Abu Bakr, all under Umar radiallahu anhu. And in the first 6 years of Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu anhu's khilafat, everyone was together. But then slowly the insurgents took over, the Khawarijis formed, then the Shias formed, and now you have like different sects of Islam. So that's like a consequence of the martyrdom of Sayyidina Uthman radiallahu ta'ala anhu. And then obviously that led to further battles which we are going to look at in Sayyidina Ali anhu's time, known as the Battle of Jamal, the Battle of Siffin. So that happened, brothers and sisters, because of the martyrdom of Uthman anhu, because the Banu Umayyah, from from where Uthman al-Anhu was from. They were thinking, or they were saying that, look, Ali al-Anhu has become the next Khalifa, but he's not actually doing enough to bring the killers of Uthman al-Anhu to justice. So that led to further differences within the Muslim Ummah. So you can imagine that it has had a grave effect on the Muslim Ummah. Obviously, the next few pages of the course book then goes on to explain about Uthman al-Anhu being a great scholar, about his characteristics and his piety, which we've already touched on before. And lastly, it just goes on to explain one or two words about his khilafat, that, as I mentioned before, that if it wasn't for Uthman al-Anhu's kindness and generosity, these rebels, they wouldn't have survived, because Uthman al-Anhu had all the army and the manpower. He just needed to give one command, and what would have happened is that the entire rebels, insurgents, they would have been wiped away. But because of Uthman al-Anhu's kindness, generosity, what happened was that he didn't want anyone to lose their lives or to have their blood shed because of Uthman al-Anhu. And this is something which we can take from today's course on Uthman al-Anhu, is that the kindness and generosity of Uthman al-Anhu, but also at the same time, and I mentioned this point at the very beginning, that sometimes there should be moments where you don't be all the time too kind and soft, because then people will take advantage. And this is what happened, unfortunately to Uthman al-Anhu, that he was too soft, too kind, but then these rebels then took advantage of him, and that led to his ultimate martyrdom and to his ultimate death. So it's something good to be kind. Rasulullah was very, very kind, but when he saw people taking advantage, Rasulullah would become angry as well. There were occasions when Prophet ﷺ would distribute the booty, and he was very kind, but then people started questioning, oh, Prophet of Allah, you're not being just. So Rasulullah ﷺ then became angry that, look, I'm being kind and generous. Why then are you then saying that I'm not being just? And then Prophet ﷺ predicted that from that person who said, I'm not just, from his nasl, i.e. from his lineage, the Khawarij and the rebels will form. So these things which we should always understand. Always understand that leaders, brothers and sisters, they have a lot of responsibilities, but they're the ones who are more at risk from people. They're the ones who are more at risk from hasidin iza hasad, from those who have hatred. So that's why it's very important that those who are imams, leaders, those who have responsibility, duties, that you don't know what people are going to say about you. You can even be teachers, you don't know what sometimes could happen. People may make accusations about you, allegations about you. So sometimes these allegations are untrue, unfounded, but it's just someone, hasidin iza hasad, who is envious of you, wants to just make some allegations and accusations. So that's why it's very important that after every salah, recite Qul a'udhu bil falaq, Qul a'udhu bi rabbin nas, to save yourself from the evil eyes, from the envy of the envious people. May Allah give us tawfiq to act upon what has been said. May Allah reward all of us for attending, the brothers and sisters, also for the brothers and sisters who volunteered in making this course successful. May Allah give us tawfiq. Wa ma alayna illa al-balagh, wa akhiru da'wana alhamdulillah. Any questions? We'll take questions for a few minutes then.
So you mentioned that Muhammad ibn Abu Bakr was said to be one of the leaders of the assassin until he got in there and he was reminded of. How did he fall into that trap in the first place?
Obviously the insurgents, they brainwashed him, coaxed him into believing. As I was saying at the beginning, this is what happens unfortunately with fitnas, and even the best, the cream, they all get involved in it. That's what happens even sometimes when this fitna is going, ulamas get involved in it. So that's the danger of fitna. Sometimes the cream also get involved in it as well.
So is it right to assume then that there were probably other Muslims who probably got embroiled in that fitna?
I did mention Ammar bin Yasir, he also as well, but Obviously, they got involved. Obviously, we'll just leave it at that in terms of we don't go into too much detail because obviously you need to look at the honor of the Sahabas. It was each jihad, they had their own opinions. That's the way we look at it. Jazakallah khair.